Hey everyone, and welcome to another hemp tip. Today we'll be going over some tips to successfully clone your plants. When it comes to making clones, the most important lesson I've trained myself to follow is to consider doing it anytime I pick up a pruning stem. Looking at defoliate a plant? Use the cuttings to make some clones. Topping a plant? Use the top stem to make a clone. Cutting off some dead leaves? Well, that won't work. But for the other times, you'd be amazed how short a defoliated stem can be and still produce new roots. And if your stems are quite long, you can even cut it in half and get 2 clones out of them, with the bonus of the bottom half stem starting out as a already topped clone. And by doing this, I pretty much never have to formally take cuttings for a clone because I'm able to make new clones from just standard plant maintenance. For the propagation setup, I recommend going with a traditional humidity dome and plant cell tray combo, as it's just so simple to set up and maintain when compared with something like a bubble cloner. For the plant cell tray, I found that using a clear tray is really useful in telling when a cutting has rooted without having to disturb the grow medium. And for the grow medium to use for propagation, after trying just about everything, I keep going back to the solid grow mediums, with my number one choice being rapid rooters, just because of all the advantages they offer. They fit exactly into a plant cell tray, can be easily inserted and removed, are mess-free, and can be transplanted into both soil or hydroponic grows once the roots have shown. Rockwool cubes are my second choice, but the problem with these is that the smaller cubes are usually a little too large for the typical cell tray, and unlike the rapid rooters, which turn dark brown when they're moist, it's a little harder to tell if a Rockwool cube is completely dried out, since a moist Rockwool cube is sort of similar in color to a dry one. If you want to use a potting mix instead, I recommend something like coco coir or peat moss, with or without perlite, since both of these grow mediums are able to retain moisture and air pretty well simultaneously, which will lower the odds of both oversaturating the cutting with water and letting the grow medium go dry. For the cuttings themselves, while it's common practice now to cut the top fan leaves in half, I found that my clone success rate increased when I just left the whole leaves intact on each of the cuttings. And nowadays, the only time I would cut leaves of the cuttings in half is if I'm producing the clones in a limited space where the leaves of one cutting might overlap another one. One thing to note is that clones can differ in root times by days, and sometimes even up to a week. For example, these are cuttings from the same plant that were all propagated at the same time. And while one of the cuttings showed roots about 5 days ago, the middle one didn't show any roots until a day after. And this one only started to show roots today. So while waiting for your roots to appear, 3 signs that a cutting is doing well is if the stem starts to stiffen up after the first few days, followed by possible yellowing of the leaf tips after a week or so, meaning that the plant is taking the nutrients from the leaves to develop a new root structure. And of course, if the plant is showing signs of new growth at the tips of the stem, although this usually happens after the roots have started to show. Finally, let's talk about moisture. The moisture of the soil and air always needs to be monitored throughout the clone process, and if you're using the clear cell trays, monitoring the moisture of the grow medium is quite easy to do. For the moisture in the air, if you don't have a humidity sensor in your humidity dome, the easiest way to tell if the air is too dry is by taking a look at the amount of water droplets in the humidity dome. If the dome and tray are both dry, you should introduce some moisture into the humidity dome. And instead of spraying the cuttings directly, you should be spraying the humidity dome walls and tray floors instead to ensure that mold doesn't start to develop on the cuttings, which can totally happen as seen here. And that's it. Like the content? Then be sure to check out our beginner's guide to creating CBD products from scratch, available at Amazon in print and digital, with links in the description below. You can also find us at hempinapot.com.